Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on understanding threat hunting at the next level of proactive security. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. Currently, you see the attendee interface in the upper right corner of your desktop. Here you have access to your audio settings, where you can choose to use your computer speaker system or select telephone to get the dial-in information. During today's webinar, you'll also have the opportunity to submit text questions by typing your queries into the question pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation, and we'll collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of Clint's presentation. I would now like to introduce Clint Marsden, one of our senior security engineers at Content Security. Clint has over 14 years of IT experience in a variety of roles, including Endpoint and Server Administration. His passion for security analysis brought him to threat hunting, and he now focuses on hunting networks for the needle in the haystack, helping businesses uncover malicious activity. Over to you, Clint.
Thanks, Matt, and welcome to everyone. Thank you for joining today. So, what are we going to talk about today? I'm going to cover off threat hunting in brief, what threat hunting means at Content Security, how we perform threat hunting. Then I'm going to go through a customer use case just to give you an example of how we spotted a ghost rat Trojan in the wild. And finally, I'm just going to cover off some things on how you can get started in threat hunting in your business today. So at Content Security, we have 4 team members in the threat hunting team. And we're proactively hunting and performing triage. And performing triage means that we're actively going through that investigation, deciding if it's a false positive or if it's a legitimate threat that needs to be escalated. And we work in a level 1 and level 2 model, where some of our team members work in level 1, and they're performing that initial level of threat hunting and really trying to identify what is important and what isn't, and try and get rid of some of that initial noise that they see. If they have any questions or they decide that it needs to be escalated to level 2, then they'll then do that, and they'll create tickets within our threat hunting platform and pass it on to our level 2 team. If from level 2 they decide that it needs to go further up the chain and it is actually a breach or an incident that requires significant investigation, we can also pass it to our incident response team that we have internally at Content as well. So, what is threat hunting? How do we define threat hunting? If you're talking about what we can feel, smell, what you can taste and see, then threat hunting is simply electrical impulses or signals interpreted by your brain. Now we know that Morpheus didn't actually say that. But what threat hunting actually is, and the way that we define it, is we are proactively looking for indicators of compromise on a network or endpoints by using a mixture of packet capture and endpoint detection and response tools. So let's go through this a little bit more. I'm going to reveal some secrets here on how we perform threat hunting and what we can actually see and what we have visibility of. With the right tools, such as RSA NetWitness, which is what we use internally at Content Security, we can see it all. We can see things like remote access Trojans, such as Ghost Rat, which is what I was just talking about a few moments ago. SQL injections, data exfiltration, whether it's an insider threat or a data breach event that's occurring. Also, we can see some command and control malware beaconing activity as well. I could go on, but the point is we have visibility. And by having this appliance and by performing threat hunting on the network egress points, by performing packet inspection and packet capture, this is how we do that. Okay, we'll just go through a few more. We can detect rogue DHCP servers. So we'll form a baseline, we'll list the DHCP servers that are legitimate within your network, and when we see something that's outside of that, we can flag that. We can detect web shells, which allow remote control of a web server from outside. And RSA have said that in all incident response cases that they perform, if they don't find a web shell, they haven't been looking hard enough, because in every incident response job that they attend, there's always a web shell. It's always a way for an external threat actor to maintain persistence and continue to control the network and potentially exfiltrate data. We're also seeing things like plain text passwords. Shadow IT activity, maybe someone is starting up an AWS environment that you don't know about. Clear text credentials in general from internal applications. Non-standard DNS traffic, which could be used as a C2, like a command and control exfiltration channel or something more sinister. And password dumping attacks, where maybe pen testers or malicious threat actors are using tools like Mimikatz or the Windows credential editor to dump plain text passwords out of memory, Windows credentials and things of that nature. This all comes up using our endpoint detection and response tools, and that's not so much on the packet side, but it's actually when we use the NetWitness endpoint tool. As threat hunters, we're looking for these red flags. We go through the artifacts that have been presented to us in the form of indexed metadata, looking for the needle in the haystack. And you've probably heard about metadata before, with the metadata that the Australian government now captures. The metadata that we capture is data from the network that's been picked up over the packets, over the egress point that's going out from your network, and also laterally within the network. That indexed metadata allows us to hunt, allows us to find those plain text passwords or those command and control channels that are occurring. And that indexing speeds up the process, is able to reduce our false positives. So we are pessimists, and in today's threat landscape, we understand that it's more than likely a breach is going to occur. The difference with threat hunting is that when the breach does occur, we're waiting by the door. We're sitting on the network egress point and we're going to see it happen. So I'd like to share an example of the framework of threat hunting and how you can get started on it today. If we're building a skyscraper, there are many things that need to be planned before the construction of the skyscraper begins. So I'm talking about the architectural drawings, the locations of services for power and gas. And this is what we do, and it's the same for threat hunting. Before we start hunting, we've got to understand some key things, which is like, what are we trying to protect? Are we trying to protect databases that hold privileged information, such as company financial data if you're a publicly traded company, or maybe even payroll data? Then we want to know, what does the network look like? Where do we need to have these packet capture devices to get that intel, to get that packet metadata? Large and complex networks have got many egress and ingress points, and that presents a potential gap in visibility. So if we have a plan to monitor these endpoints, we can form a baseline and discover what's normal. So as I've said before, hunting is like finding the needle in the haystack. And to do this, we carve the artifacts that we discover. When I talk about carving, I'm talking about brushing the hay to the side, like a funnel, that we're narrowing the pool of data and the pool of everything that we can see from that packet capture. We're narrowing it down like a funnel. We're looking for something that's specific. And we might start at the widest point of that haystack, as in the top of the funnel where everything's ingested. And as we get lower and lower through that funnel, as we're carving, as we're going through that data and searching through that meta, we may get to the end of that funnel and find that there's no needle at all. And it can be a little bit frustrating. But we start again. We start in a different pile of hay, and the piles of hay could be considered as hunting objectives. So one of our objectives will be to locate a web shell. So we go to the pile of hay where the web shell needle may be found, and we begin to carve that hay. And this time, as we're carving, we do find the needle in the haystack that we're looking for. So this means it would be time to escalate to our level 2 team, or potentially our incident response team, and take it a little bit further. This is what threat hunting is, though. As analysts, one of our key skill sets is to use our inquisitive nature, and we want to chase things down the rabbit hole. Sometimes I describe threat hunting as I go down the rabbit hole and find that there's no rabbit. and then we back out and we start again, and we look at that down that different rabbit hole, or we look at that different pile of hay. So we actually provide a service to our clients where we have we provide combined threat intelligence from our incident response team, intelligence from other sources such as content protection, and we also have a dedicated team of analysts hunting and giving advance notice to our clients of malware that exists in the environment, or maybe even a data breach occurring. And at the end of the day, it depends on the client's individual objectives. That comes back down to knowing what we're trying to protect. What are we looking for? So I'm just going to get into a customer use case now and give you a bit of a story as to what we found. This was an example of a potential botnet case from one of our clients. And so we received this email that was basically saying, we think we've got a GhostRat botnet on our network. Do you think that you can help us out and look into it for us? So the customer let us know that they engaged a security vendor to drop a box in to perform a network security audit. These are very common. These happen all the time, where vendors will give you a security appliance for free to test it out and see if it can provide any value. At the end of that assessment, at the end of that network security audit, after about a month, they advised the customer that they had GhostRat, but there was no further information. All they could say was that you've got GhostRat on your network somewhere. That's when the customer emailed content security and said, we think we've got GhostRat. So the customer's enterprise anti-malware solution had just been upgraded, and alarm bells were going off for our engineering team, as we thought that the solution that we'd recently upgraded wasn't doing the job for them and it actually missed the mark. Now we know that with GhostRat we had a specific use case. We had some information from RSA that specifically talks about threat hunting and how it can find things like GhostRat in the environment. And this is when we made the suggestion to our client that said, let's deploy NetWitness packets and logs for a period of 6 weeks. We're going to perform hunting each week. We're going to spend 4 hours, and at the very least we're going to get to the bottom of this, and we're going to discover where GhostRat is in the environment, and potentially if there's anything else that's going on. Are there data breaches occurring? Is it something more sinister than just a GhostRat infection that could have been a once-off? The customers decided, yep, let's proceed, and off we went. We deployed NetWitness in a couple of days and we began hunting. So we performed our 4 hours of hunting each week, and each week we're writing a summary report, and we advised the client that at the end of this we would write up a summary of those findings at the conclusion of that engagement. This is one of the analyst views that we actually get as we're performing hunting, and using one of the tools, and I won't get too specific on the tools that we use, but this is just the way that we can see what's actually going on, and basically from that indexed metadata we can see that it's flagged it as being a potential GhostRat infection. The source IP up the top was our first clue. We knew that it was coming in from outside, so we thought it might be a command and control server, but we weren't quite sure. We knew that we had 4 sessions, and that's what we can see in the green brackets up the top. And then we've got the destination IP addresses of where it was actually hitting the clients inside. Upon further investigation, we actually found that the source IP was from Shodan. And if you know Shodan, it's basically a search engine for Internet of Things devices. And it's been featured in the news recently with the Mirai botnet, of course, but Shodan has also been gathering threat intelligence of their own. So fortunately for our customer, it was only Shodan. But what does that really mean? The vendor who'd advised the customer of the issue didn't actually perform threat hunting and further investigation to gather that further detail. This is an issue for a lot of security appliances, as they don't have that detail. They don't have that ability to drill down and perform thorough investigation. They can't always get details of the packet itself and make an instant determination whether it is something legitimate or if it's just noise or just a false positive. So we actually found that Shadan had been scanning the internet for instances of ghost rats since at least March in 2017. This is the article that talks about Ghost Rat and Shadan doing those scans. And down the bottom, I've actually circled in red an example of the Ghost Rat payload. And this is how Ghost Rat is detected. The common theme that we find in threat hunting is that malware authors are not going to a lot of trouble to try and hide their tracks. That was in the malware payload right there. We can see it. It clearly says ghost. And that's an instant indicator of compromise that we've been able to use to then perform hunting. And that's what one of the tools does for us in identifying the Ghost Rat Trojan itself. So businesses are coming to us and telling us that they don't actually have the expertise to perform threat hunting. They're telling us that they don't have the resources available. Their security team's small, they're flat out, they're busy. But by being proactive, that will reduce dwell time. And depending on who your source is, whether it's Gartner, whether it's ForcePoint or other security vendors, the average time to detect a data breach is between 99 to 180 days. I would have loved to give you a source and mention something in particular, but it varies for everyone. It varies depending on geographical location as well. So if you want to start hunting in your business, how can we go about it? The first thing is to identify what's important to you. Identify what's important based on your risk appetite and what matters most to your business. Is it personally identifiable information? Is it payroll data? Do you have manufacturing plans? Or are you trying to prevent disruption, trying to prevent an outage if you're a service provider? The next thing is to enable more auditing. So by enabling more auditing, it gives you better detection and response capabilities. In addition to this, you want to make sure that all of your servers and endpoints are using the same time source. This is critically important when you're performing your hunting and investigation activities. Also, out-of-the-box auditing for Windows servers just isn't enough. You want to go through and turn more auditing on, for example, turning on PowerShell auditing, and you can see what PowerShells are run, depending on how much capacity you have to store logs. If it's possible, look at storing logs for longer than the default. The default Windows settings for out-of-the-box on average is to wipe logs as the older ones reach their expiration time. New logs will overwrite those, and it only lasts for about 7 days. Ideally, we can hold logs for 90 days, 180 days, even better. You've actually got a better chance at performing better incident response in the event of a data breach. And you'll actually be in a better position than most. You'll also want to set time aside each week to perform hunting. I think the biggest challenge these days is for a lot of businesses that we get caught up in day-to-day operations. We don't have a strict schedule. What we need to do is to set aside a few hours each week dedicated to just performing that. And finally, we want to focus on one thing at a time. Have a plan that defines hunting for data breaches 1 week, maybe week 1. Week 2 might be for command and control malware. And then week 3 might be web shells. And this is the best way to obtain accurate results. What I found with our hunting internally is that if we focus on one thing at a time, we give it our entire attention, and we don't get distracted while we're hunting and start looking for something else in the middle of chasing that rabbit down the hole, trying to find that needle in the haystack. So with that, I hope that the webinar has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank everyone for taking time out of their busy schedules to attend. I'm going to pass it over to Matt, and he'll wrap up.
Thanks, Clint. Yeah, very insightful. I've just sort of checked. We don't have any questions at the moment, but I may leave it open for a little bit just in case anyone wants to add a question into the question pane on the right-hand side of your screen. Just while we wait, I kind of have a question of my own. For that use case, Clint, that you went through, so the customer sort of found out that they didn't have Ghostwrite on their network, and then like what happened next? Like had they, because if they kind of had thought they'd been breached, I'm assuming, and if they found out they didn't, did they sort of, what was the outcome for them?
Look, it was very surprising for the customer actually, and when we first told them that they indeed didn't have Ghostwrite, they didn't believe us, because the appliance that they had put in was from a well-known, trusted security vendor, but the level of visibility that we had by using our threat hunting tool, which is NetWitness, we were able to show them in detail the details of the packet. We could show them the source and destination. We could then also provide further hunting detail on those endpoints from the 2 destination IPs and show that they didn't have any outbound activity after that, and that it was only inbound. And that was the key difference for them. We could actually drill down and give them that high level of detail, or that low level of detail, if you like, to explain exactly why they didn't have a breach. We could prove to them that there was no breach that had occurred.
Yep. No, very cool. So it gives them peace of mind, I guess. So yeah. So we don't have. Oh yeah, we do have one question. So one of the questions we have is, do you do anything in the way of cutting out the noise in your logs that you send to RSA? And if yes, what is it?
Do we do anything cutting out the noise? I guess the biggest benefit of the tool is that it's able to index that metadata for us straight away, and I could do a detailed session on how we perform hunting, which would explain that, and I'll be able to show the interface in great detail. But the way that we perform hunting in cutting out that noise is that we will select individual items or individual pieces of meta, and we will combine those together to form a particular stream. And as we're actually carving, we carve out a very narrow view of what we're looking for. So it will index everything as a whole, present all the data into several hundred categories essentially, and then we will, using our hunting techniques, narrow that down, and that's how we cut the noise down.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, Kevin, if you have any more questions, please feel free to sort of shoot through an email, and then I can even set up some time for you and Clint to discuss further. But yeah, if there's no more questions, I might finish this up. So everyone will receive a recording of this webinar either later today or early tomorrow. So thank you very much for attending. And yeah, please do not hesitate to get in contact with me. You should have all my information through the invitation emails and the webinar emails that were sent through. So yeah, on behalf of Content Security, thank you for joining, and enjoy the rest of your day.